Okay, and I think we're recording. Welcome everyone to episode 14 of the Scholar Gypsies. I'm delighted today to have Jimmy Rhatigan in for an interview and a chat with me. Jimmy is the publisher of the Kilkenny Press, and if many of you remember, I had Patrick E. Walsh on our last episode, who analysed, broke down, and released the data with regard to excess deaths in Kilkenny, and that a lot has happened in the interim from that conversation to this one I'm having with Jimmy. I wanted to have Jimmy on for multiple reasons, not just to do with the excess deaths and the work he's done there, but also Jimmy spent over 50 years in local journalism, right up from cub reporter up to editor of various local newspapers, and has been involved in online publications. And this present one, the Kilkenny Press, is in operation for about 2 years. So we're going to have a chat with Jimmy. And I suppose, Jimmy, thanks for coming on and having a
You're
talk
very
with me.
welcome, Jerry.
I suppose I wanted to get, I'm always fascinated with people and newspapermen that have been in the business for, I think, without getting into too much, over 50 years since you started.
Roughly 52, 53 years, yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to get a sense of what it was like, how you were trained, and what was your experiences. Everybody remembers their first job. I was wondering what your first job in local media was, and where it was.
Jerry, believe it or not, my dad died very young, and when I was only 3, and my brother was 12 days old, and that kind of stuff, and my mother was 28, and it's something I've written a book about, and sure, we can maybe talk about that again. My ma told me at the time, I remember, and I coming up along, that I was reading newspapers on my knees from about the age of 3. I was in love with them from the time I was born. But to make a long story short, I went to Kilkenny CBS Primary School and Kilkenny CBS Secondary School in Kilkenny, and I wasted my time probably in both, more so the secondary, because I just wasn't interested. But this great day anyway, the Kilkenny People newspaper, which would have been one of the better newspapers in Ireland, I'd say, for years. How it stands now, I don't really know the way newspapers are, but they were looking for a cub reporter. And all of us in the Leaving Cert class were encouraged to apply. And they must have picked the name out of a hat, as in a raffle, because I got the job. Okay. And I ended up there for 38 years. It was a smashing place to work. It was family owned, a great place to work. You were well looked after. You were properly trained, which doesn't happen enough nowadays. If at all, Jerry. If at all. And I'll tell you how it was done, Jerry. I remember when I went in anyway, there was a chap called Sean Hurley was there. He was one of the senior reporters. He was absolutely brilliant. And I was hugely interested in journalism. I just wanted to be a journalist and be as good as I possibly could. So he saw that and he took me under his wing. And I suppose that's why I stuck it and enjoyed it all the years. I learned a mountain about journalism from Sean. So he was the man that if I ever win the Pulitzer Prize, which I probably won't, maybe we will between us, Jerry. It'll be his fault, as it were. So that was the start. It was a great start, and newspapers that time, national and local. One was better than the other. They were all brilliant. The journalists were hugely dedicated, mostly well able to write and do their jobs. Something I can't say 100% about nowadays. Again, and I don't want to be pitting one against the other too much. But I eventually ended up anyway. I moved on to edited the Kilkenny Voice myself, and then I edited a few more ones, and I had an online newspaper with my old friend Sean Hurley. And when I retired, a guy he was one of the designers I worked with, he gave me a present of the website, and here I am. and it was probably kept me sane,
Mm-hmm.
because I was used to, Jerry, when I get up or when I hear something, a story to be done, I get up and I go after that bit.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be no messing around. I remember being in the Kilkenny People when time was moving on. I was there well over 30 years. And I was the oldest, second oldest or third oldest maybe, journalist in the newsroom. And the editor that was there was a fairly new guy. I didn't go for the job because I knew the other one was coming up. That's just as by way of explanation. He asked, was there anyone who wanted to interview the smallest man in the world, who was a clown, a Hungarian clown? And I got up and I said, oh, gee, I'll do that. No one else in the newsroom was interested. So I knew it was time for me to get the marching shoes on, and I went
Mm-hmm.
and to run my own ship. It still was a great newspaper for years now. I wouldn't take anything away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Then slowly but surely, like most of the other provincial papers, most of which were good publications, the slide came. It's not too long ago since the slide began, Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
The change in recent years, I would say pandemic years, in local and national and international journalism, is frightening.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
tell me
frightening.
about it.
It's probably the first time, Jerry, I'd say it's not probably, it is the first time in my life that I've seen journalism censoring itself.
Yes. There's a lot of
There
that
was,
going on.
yeah, absolutely. And what I'm talking about, of course, is I suppose at the nub of the equation, as it were, we would have, the COVID, the vaccines, and all things COVID, what you couldn't do, lockdowns, masks, the whole lot. There was a narrative which was, I don't know where the dark room is situated in the world. I suspect it's somewhere between China and America, but they called the shots anyway. And every government in the world seemed to buy into it. And every newspaper in the world bought into it, because the only stories I saw covered or remember covered at all during this time were
Mm-hmm.
positives. Get this, you have to do that. You can't eat there. You can't go outside your borough boundary for a spin in the car with your children, blah, 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 and all that. It smacked to me from the very beginning as a control campaign rather than a health campaign. And then I suppose, the people with alternate views, the people who we call them the those who promoted the narrative would have seen these people as, wouldn't touch them or wouldn't touch him with a 40-foot pole, that kind of a scenario. Anyone that questioned the narrative about how good this was, how that had to be done and whatever, was a black sheep. And I'm talking about doctors in particular. The number of doctors that were suspended and sacked over a period was frightening, absolutely frightening. And some of them are still sacked and no work.
Yeah,
I know
sure. I
some
know
of
it.
them. I know some.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
sorry,
think you.
Jerry, go ahead.
I believe you were. Yeah, no, sure. I think you believe you were talking to Dr. Jerry Waters recently. He'd have been
I
one of
was
them.
only the other night, Jerry. I will come back to the journalists in a second. Only the other night I was talking to Jerry. Now while I'm calling him Jerry, he's not a friend of mine. I don't mean to say that in any crazy way, but he's an acquaintance really, and I'd love to have him as a friend. He's a terrific guy. But all he did was give his opinion about vaccines and the way the modus operandi of the people who were controlling the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he got called in, he got censored, he got suspended, and then he got sacked. He could not. His the Irish medical council revoked his certificate or whatever it is, his right to practice. So Jerry was out of work, and he's out of work. And I'm looking forward to listening to him in Kilkenny in hopefully about 3 weeks' time, the 21st of February. He's just coming for an evening talk, sort of with friends, anyone that wants to turn up. God knows what they'll hear, but I'd say they'll be well educated. And he's a decent man. He's a good man. I'd say he's probably an angry man. I have no real proof of that, but I'd say he must be. He must be.
Oh, how would you
And
not be?
there's plenty other doctors. I don't know them all. And then what I did was, maybe we'll go along at this stage, if it's all right with you, to my friend about who I've been writing in recent times about the huge hike in deaths, sudden
Yes.
deaths,
Well, that's
and
exactly it. Now, before we jump into Patrick and the great work you've been doing there over the
yes,
last number of months, I just wanted to ask you a quick question. When you were saying it was a kind of a recent phenomenon, or what's happened with regard to narrative self-censoring, all this kind of stuff in the local press.
yes.
Was that to do with, in your opinion now, was that to do with a big increase of government and maybe EU spending in these newsrooms in terms of advertising and that kind of thing, or was it just
Jerry,
a different?
I have no doubt about it. Up to recent years, I would have had nothing but praise for most of the journalists in Ireland. You can look at, like in any profession, you can never say them all, because some are good, some are bad, and some are mediocre and whatever. But no, where was I going? Sorry, the senior year cropped in there for a minute.
You were saying definitely it was to do with kind of government money and
Oh yeah,
EU.
sorry. Yeah, we're after yeah. Oh yeah. I don't know where the orders were coming from, whether they were coming from management or whatever. But as we all know nowadays, unfortunately, newspapers are struggling. Local radios are struggling, and the newspapers are local and national. So they need a way of keeping the door open, and I can't blame them for that. But I think, well, I was worried when I saw where the government was considering propping up, that's the best way I can put it, local newspapers, local media, let's just say. And then they cut the VAT, as you know. I think they did this, something similar, with the daily papers. I was worried then, because when you hear Micheál Martin and his ilk talking about protecting the freedom of the press. I mean, to me, that's gibberish, pure and utter gibberish. What he really meant, I would suggest, is controlling the press. And you know that he who pays the piper, the old saying, who caused the tune there. So I do know that newspapers, I don't know if they all do or whatever, what the criteria are for getting the Queen's shilling. But I'd say the government funds, are propping up a lot of publications. And I did write an article about it before that went down well in most places, but went down very badly in the newspaper industry, I would say. And not too many gave out to me, but I knew by the growls. And where I said, if you have to keep the door open by becoming a prostitute, forget about it. And that's all the media is going to be. And it's so sad. Look at, from your dealings, I'm sure, with lots of press people, maybe here and there are some good people there still, very good people. And some of them are not in the mainstream media for the simple reason is that they'd be their own people, if you know what I mean. You probably know some of the people I'm talking about.
Oh, look, I know plenty, I know plenty, and there's lots of people doing good work.
John Waters being, a great example. I mean, I would regard John Waters, for instance, as, and I don't know John, I've never spoken to him, but what I do know is I'd respect him hugely as a journalist. He speaks his mind. He doesn't go around on the peripheries writing a story. He goes to the heart of the story.
Absolutely.
And he writes from the heart. And he says it regardless of whether me, you, and the dog,
Yeah.
whatever way we take it. So
Yeah.
it's very, very sad, I think. I think from the pandemic, um, a lot of the outcomes for different groups in society are not going to be good. I'm not talking about vaccines or anything like that. I'm talking about the medical profession. It didn't stick together. Most of the medical profession, I would assume, maybe most of them believe that they're doing 100% right, but others did it for different reasons. They had different motives and whatever. And then the people that I would call the brave hearts, maybe, other people might have different words for them, but I would see them as a kind of the brave hearts who wanted to give the public an alternative view, were gonged on the head. So I would say that the media, the press, and politicians, God love them, they all have huge looking at themselves to do. I don't know how they're going to patch up. I'd say there's indifference. I'd say there's rows that took place, maybe behind the scene, maybe not at scenes, maybe not all in public. They'll never patch them up. And I
No.
don't know if you read a book. There's a very good book on the medical profession by Professor Seamus O'Mahony. He's a professor, or at least was. I think he might be retired now. He was a gastroenterologist at Cork University Hospital. And the name of his book, I hope I'm getting it exactly right, is, I think it's Can Medicine Cure Itself? Now, I said, geez, I'm going to have a look at that. It had nothing to do with the pandemic. It was before that. But it spoke about the change that was already taking place in medicine, where maybe people going into medicine and that kind of thing were a little bit more self-centered than the people of old who would have seen, and the same in the other professions, who would have seen their professions as vocations, who would have put their heart and soul in. And I remember, you probably remember the time too, when if you rang looking for a doctor at 3 o'clock in the morning, he'd come out to you. And he'd
I
come
do.
to your house.
Absolutely. And we had in our village now, we had a great doctor. God rest her soul, Dr. Norma McGarry. And and I'll tell you one thing, I don't know, when you're a teenager or whatever, and you're going through different things. And I'd say what I had was a bit of melancholy or something like that. So I had this kind of, the way I was describing it, a fuzz in my head. And I went to the GP, and she looked at me and she said, oh yeah. And she asked me a few questions, and she says, are you doing exercise? What are you eating healthy? This is back in the late 80s now, maybe. When none of the doctors, and she says, I'm not putting you on antidepressants. There's no way, that isn't.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah.
And she said, there's probably just a kind of a phase or something you're going through. And she let me out the door. And nowadays, the same scenario probably would have ended up with a prescription.
Yeah. It's a little bit worrying there. Like, I mean, our friends in the pharmaceutical world, now that's a whole different debate, really. Look at, I've attended doctors over the years, and some of them are marvelous people, really marvelous people now. And to say, and in the minute that when the doctor would come at 3 o'clock in the morning or what, I understood that at some stage they had to regulate that. They deserve lives too, they deserve their time off and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not just flying a flag for the medical profession generally, but some of them I really would admire, and some of them got me out of little holes if I was half dying or whatever. So it's fair that I put it on record that I don't see every doctor in the world as being a vagabond sort of a thing. That's some good people.
No, I don't either, but I think there's there is, if you take Tuam, for example, as a town, it's about 10,000 people. The two most prevalent businesses in this town are bookie offices and pharmacies.
Crazy stuff,
if you go down the
crazy
main
stuff.
street, and if you go down any town this size, they're the two, but put it this way, there's business for those two businesses in towns like
Yeah,
Tuam and that around the country. So that kind
yeah.
of what it kind of does tell you, it's a worrying kind of thing to think about, I suppose, really, in a
It
sense.
is really, Jerry. Well, like, I mean, I got a stroke in 2007, and you kind of, when you get an illness or something like that, uh, you're nearly you go into the medical chain kind of a thing.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
You're
yeah,
going
yeah.
for your tests and all. And look, I know that some of the drugs I have been on, and some of them I'm still on, would have been necessary. For instance, like blood thinners and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
You
yeah,
have to take it. But having said that, it's gas on the blood thinners. You'll see. Is it which one of the fruits? Is it grapefruit? Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
don't take grapefruit because grapefruit thins your blood. So why couldn't we get a bottle of grapefruit? And honest to God, I'm that's on mine. If
Yeah.
could get me tablets there now, but I better not interrupt your interview. That's crazy stuff. Um, and I suppose the reason is crazy. Let's be honest about it.
Mm-hmm.
The big pharmaceutical companies will flog you anything, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. They've proven that. Without going into any names, myself and you wouldn't look good sitting in the back of the High Court for a few months trying to defend ourselves. So they
Definitely
know
not
who they
me.
are. Like, I mean, they've had disasters over the years. They sent out big pharmaceuticals sent out drugs that weren't properly tested, and some of the ones that were tested they told lies about. And I've written those in medical books, so I'm not making it up as I go along with you.
Yeah, and that segues nicely into the kind of the COVID era, and I suppose the excess deaths. I suppose to prime the question would be, as a journalist, when Patrick Walsh came to you with all of this data that he'd extrapolated from RIP.ie,
Yeah.
what was your first reaction to it? Were you frightened?
Actually,
Were
there's
you
a funny one,
excited?
and we spoke about it's good, I suppose, to be able to laugh in the middle of all this tragedy and whatever we have going on, controversy. But the gas part about it was, this was roughly, I'd say, 3 months ago, I think, Jerry. Um, I was the only part of local media that Patrick didn't contact, not because he didn't like me or that he didn't know about my website at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So the irony was that he sent it to the local radios and he sent it to uh, the local newspapers, and he sent it to all, I think it's 24 county councillors in Kilkenny. And he was met with a deafening silence.
Mm-hmm.
No, most of I think, how I got involved, I suppose, first, accidentally, someone sent it on to me who got it in a newsroom or something and said, "Hey, this is right up your alley." And I read it, and this was shortly, I'd say, after they got it themselves, because they knew they weren't going to do anything with it. And the now, it may not have been a newspaper. I can't remember where it came from anyway. But having said that, he and Patrick told me this morning. He said I was on to him with it in 10 minutes of it being up on any screen. And he says, "Where did you find out about this?" Look, went into the story again, and the gas part about it all was, or the I suppose the irony, it was kind of a marriage made in heaven, because Patrick had a mission that he wanted to carry out. He wanted to be brave, to find out with these excess deaths, why were they happening, and how was he going to find out? Because very quickly he found out that no one was going to publish anything from it. So then he found this by here on the other end of the phone, and we were just made for each other. He
Mm-hmm.
wanted somebody to carry. He was sort of he had the gun, and I was firing it. And
That and
we're
that.
not. Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, go on. Finish your point
Yeah,
there.
we're not, like, I mean, Patrick would be coming at it from a different angle than I would be coming at it. His thing is, and he's a very sincere chap. And again, there's another irony this morning. He called to me here in the house this morning to help me set up for this interview with you.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm after saying so. I
No,
should be
you're grand.
beside you, shouldn't I? Yeah.
No.
And I said to him, "How are you doing?" Says I, and it was the first time we met.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all the other meetings were on the telephone, and we've been keeping saying to each other,
All right. Okay.
"We must go and have a coffee," and it never happened because you see, I was coming at it from a journalistic point of view, and Patrick was coming at it probably, well, an information point of view, which would be in some most ways myself as well. But he wanted just to simply ease the minds of a worried population. Say the reason people are dying is this. He didn't want, I know from the beginning, anyone to say vaccines killed all these people, because nobody can say that. Nobody can say that, whether we like it or not. And I was viewing it from, I just felt that the narrative, what it was doing, and I knew most of the stories, how people were being bullied, how people were being threatened with losing their jobs if they didn't take a jab, and this kind of stuff. And look at, I don't know whether the people doing that were doing it for love or money, let's say.
This is the question.
Maybe it's a subtle way of putting it. But I said, why are we not hearing the other side of the story? And sure, then it was as if Patrick just fell into my lap, metaphorically speaking, of course. And off we went. And it took off from the word go. And in the beginning, we were getting a good reaction, very, very good reaction from all over the world now, I might add. Now, I'm not saying there was every country in the world. There's 180 or something of them. I think we only got 179. No. But we were getting, I was getting calls from Australia. I was getting calls from the US. I was getting calls from England. And look at it, I don't think there's any more, but I'd love to, I could have told you, and then you think I was really great. But no, it snowballed. Curiosity sometimes can kill a cat, I know, but people, when they read, that's not this, no, that's not. Next thing, it snowballed. Other people were taking interest. There was the series, I don't know if you read or looked at it or read the book, Robert F. Kennedy.
Yes, the real Anthony Fauci.
The great Anthony Fauci, yeah. Now, I would have done a little bit of research on the great Anthony Fauci, and I'm glad I have a good doctor and a trustworthy doctor in Kilkenny. That's all I'd say. Him and other high-profile world people, and the way they were involved in it, the multimillionaires, the people with all the money, and then you got the conspiracy theories. I know that this is all about killing half the world and all, and getting rid of. We don't want that. We don't need those people. They're in our way. They're a nuisance. We shouldn't have to be feeding them. Not saying there mightn't be an element of truth in it, but I just don't know. But all I wanted to do is, I didn't want anyone to condemn the vaccine. All right, certainly wouldn't condemn the vaccine, nor would I tell anyone to take it. I mean, I'm trying to do what too many journalists didn't do. Act responsibly as a journalist. When you're telling a story, you know how many sides there are to every story. We all know that we were probably told that as little boys in primary school. You
have to ask the questions when you don't want to answer the questions.
Exactly. And the pertinent questions. And I'll be honest with you, I probably stopped watching RTE television because of it. This march that they used to have out and all every day, it was like a ceremonial march. I remember being in Arlington Cemetery years ago at the changing of the guard, and it was a thing of beauty in a very sad place. But this reminded me of it, and it had pomp and ceremony about it. And there was a kind of, I'm going back to Tony Houlihan's days, and I have my views on Tony Houlihan, but I'm sure he's a good man in a lot of ways and a great dad and probably a great whatever, but maybe he's good in other ways too. But look at again, I have an opinion and that's it, but I'm not going to
Yeah. There's no point getting.
I'm not going to draw anyone's wrath on either of us.
No, but the fullness of time will sort him out.
It probably will. There were a lot of things that were done. I think I don't want to go off the beaten track for and with
No, keep going.
With Phillips or with Patrick's situation. But I think, to be honest, the words that you just said there, time will settle enough, will sort out an awful lot of people. I'll be honest, I think, Jerry, there's a day of reckoning coming, and it's going to be unpleasant. There was a small, I have to say now, maybe a light. The light shone a little better at the end of the tunnel in the Dáil the other day when Leo Varadkar I would have to say begrudgingly accepted that there were excess deaths, and he would talk to the chief medical officer, I think it's a lady called Breda Smyth, about them.
Well, when I look at that now, to me, that's down to the work that the two of you have done, because you made a good point there when you said you were a match made in heaven, because when I spoke to Patrick, and obviously I didn't know him, but it was rightly or wrongly a good thing that Patrick was an accountant,
absolutely
he was diving into data. And then the other blessing was you were a man 50 years in local journalism who knew how to question and look at what he did to pick holes in it, and wouldn't have published it if you weren't satisfied. So I think the combination of that, when the information was released, it was very, I know it was ignored, but I think you told me one day some of your articles were getting 50,000 hits on the website.
That's right. Right. On Twitter. Yeah, I'm not on Twitter myself, so I was relying on the likes of Patrick so he was able to tell me. And, there was good characters coming in on him. There was the likes of, Eddie Hobbs, and people like him were big, Ivor Cummins, and they'd be huge names when they'd read Jimmy Rhatigan, they'd say, Jimmy who? But they'd know them, and they seem to flock when people like that.
Do you know what I personally believe? Nothing against Eddie and Ivor, because I think I follow both of them. For this particular story, your gravitas trumped theirs, because you were in the beat. You were on the beat for 50 years in the local arena and in the journalism. So when I saw that, I said, "Oh, these two are going to be very hard to label or tar or anything." So personally speaking, I think Leo Varadkar's statement, which belatedly happened, wouldn't have happened. Might never have happened, but wouldn't have happened for another 5-6 months without the pressure of what you did. Because 2 days after I interviewed Patrick, and I had another article up, front page of the Connacht Telegraph was about excess deaths in Mayo.
Great.
And then when I saw that,
I saw that actually, yeah.
When I saw that, I says, "Oh, all right, they can't ignore this now." The local papers around the country are starting to get a bit braver.
Yeah, and I think there was, to be fair, and to give credit where credit is due, the Cork Examiner had a good story as well, and I think it was it Peadar O'Toole who brought it up in the Dáil.
Oh, the leader of Inter,
yeah, I think he brought up he's not the Cork Examiner, the Irish Examiner. He brought that up, and then Mr. Varadkar or Taoiseach, well, he got on the bandwagon, if you like, but he was kind of prefacing it with the reasons why it might happen. So he put his own little narrative out there too, and I would hope, Jerry, for the sake, not just for the sake of common decency, and for the sake of all the people who maybe didn't or did take the vaccine, that they're told, that we learn what's going on. If it's a situation that people are passing away from eating too much whatever or blah, blah, blah. Look, at least we'll know. But now it's shrouded in mystery. Nobody
Mhm.
knows. And
Mhm.
why, oh, why didn't the media shun it so much?
Well, we know, like, I think we both know why, like, in the sense, in the broad scheme of things,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
we know whether it was through arrogance of their own position, if we were to be kind, and I mean kind of saying that um, they were on the same page as they were all in it together from the beginning of this narrative. I think
Yeah.
there was some sort of unholy alliance made at the beginning of COVID. Maybe it was always there to a degree. I don't know. But I think there was this unholy alliance between our state bodies, our governments, and we remember there was no government for the first 2 or 3 months, and it was just kind of
That's
fine
right.
Gael on
That's
their
right.
own.
That's right.
And the media where for whatever reason they kind of came to this common approach to not question these draconian measures that were being rolled
Yeah.
out across the country.
And don't forget the Godfathers, the
Oh,
pharmaceuticals.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're the
So,
godfathers of this. It's a gravy train for them. It's a bloody
mm,
it's a massive nose in a very very lucrative trough.
mm-hmm, well put.
You know who what normally puts their nose into a trough, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Hungry, 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 hungry. It's frightening because it's one of the things that puzzled me. In the very beginning, there were a couple of red flags, but I'd say the one that scared me a little bit. I'm not saying which way I went after that because I never discussed, for obvious reasons, whether I did or didn't get vaccinated, nor do I ever ask anybody whether they got vaccinated or not. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's too personal, you know. It's like going up to a person and saying, "Well, did you go to the toilet this morning? Did you wipe your backside?" In the name of God, you know, it's fair. You're totally infringing on people's privacy.
Well, that was
So
the thing. I think if we were to step back as a people and say the mistake we made, if
mhm,
we were to say mistakes we made, was to allow the conversation to become a scientific debate rather than a human right debate. As in,
yeah,
sorry, you don't have the right to infringe on my bodily integrity with a
yeah.
medicine.
Yeah, but
And
just to sorry, Jerry, just to finish that in case I forget it, the reason that the red flag was flying for me, the I don't know, I don't think they achieved it in the end. Now, yeah, no, they did, but the pharmaceuticals wanted they wanted a sort of an assurance that they wouldn't. The word that I should have a stronger word than assurance, but. Um, they wouldn't be telling people what was in the vaccine for 75 years.
mhm,
Today, most of them would certainly be in the plots,
mhm.
and you know, it was a great fucking it was a great
Sorry,
cover for
sure.
it's a great cover for them.
Yeah, yeah.
That would have worried me, you know. And then when the bullying that went on as
Mhm,
well, I would have been concerned about. You know, I would know people who would be working in the medical profession, not necessarily all doctors, nurses, and whatever. A lot of them great people, but some of them had, and some doctors from the word go were very suspicious. As you know, they didn't want to be any involvement with the vaccine. I don't know whether they're right or wrong. That will be remain to be seen, I think. But I would say that they certainly have. Uh, they have a lot to say, and a lot of it I would suspect is quite credible.
yeah, yeah. I
So,
totally
yeah, yeah.
agree.
So you know, I think that then the big pharma and the amount of money, the number of billions of dollars, probably mostly, that they've paid out in compensation over the years for literally taking people's lives.
Mhm.
I mean, if that was out in the street, and God forbid they were wielding a knife or holding a gun, they'd end up for a lifetime in jail.
Mm-hmm. Well, I suppose there's, between everything that's going on, I think one of the, you might say, benefits, or one of the outcomes of the last 3 years, is that I think it's had the effect that everybody is starting to question all types of medication and all types of vaccines, whether they're right to do that or wrong to do that, as to whether there's, like your grapefruit example there, whether there's alternatives to becoming, because it's often you get on the train, especially when you kind of get to my age now in the late 40s, you get on, you start getting on something, maybe blood pressure tablets, or you might have high cholesterol, and you kind of get on the gravy train and you never get off it.
Yeah, well, Terry, if you're on the gravy train, I think I'm driving it at this stage. Yeah, I saw one. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen this, but I've seen one. You know, you get the leaflet.
Yeah.
If you take this, be wary of taking that. You know, the side effects.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it written on one of those leaflets. I'm sure it's on plenty of them. I just don't, and thank God I'm not on that many tablets. But one of the side effects was death. DEATH. A side effect of medication.
Mm-hmm.
So all they were doing was covering themselves.
Yeah.
That's all they're doing. They're putting the thing there. I would think that the pharmaceutical profession generally is one of the great evils of the modern world. They won't thank me for saying that, but I'm sure it won't trouble them too much either. I was watching TV the other night. Don't ask me what station I was watching. I know it wasn't RTE. And I think he was the CEO. I'm not going to say the company because I'm not sure it was that particular company. One of the big wigs of the pharma world. And there was 3 or 4 journalists running after him, asking him quite simple questions. And all he did was ignore them and say, "Do have a good day," and things like that. Sure, a few things I find, if you have to censor somebody, and if you have to bully someone, you're not in control of what you're doing. No, you're bullying that. What would worry me is, and I would hate to see it. I mean, I like living in Ireland. I love living in Ireland, except when it's too cold or too snowy or whatever. But sure, look, we have to put up with that. There's an awful lot of positives about living in Ireland, and I can tell you, Jerry, you probably know there's an awful lot of positives about living in Kilkenny. And the one thing you don't want to do is have something that should be for the good, maybe splitting our people in two. That's the worry. I mean, you could end up, and I hope not. That's why this bloody excess debt situation must be tidied up. Because in the beginning, I remember there were people who were totally devoted to the narrative, which is their privilege, but they were a little bit nasty to some other people who weren't quite as quick. Oh, sure, you'll give the disease to us and all, and then look at it, you're this and you're that and you're the other. But the only thing is that of course we found out that not only did it not stop you from getting the disease, but it didn't stop you from spreading it either.
No. And we kind of instinctively, for whatever reason, an awful lot of people I talked to instinctively figured that out. And I suppose the divide is there. Like, there's no point denying the divide is there, for a lot of people. And the problem is a lot of these people that are gone silent on deaths now were looking into the last detail of every COVID death 2 years ago and producing graphs and charts and all sorts of analysis on that. Yeah. And suddenly, nobody wanted to know. But like, I look, the positive is it's meted to the Taoiseach's mouth. He said the words. He has to follow through now. And as you said, we'll see what we find. Let's hope that inquiry is an objective one, not a subjective one or not a coerced one. And we actually get to the bottom of what's going on.
sorry, Jerry. Remember in the beginning that every COVID death in Ireland was a tragedy.
Mm.
Now there are lots of deaths that we don't know how or why really they're happening, and no one wants to even talk about it.
Mm-hmm. So there was
Bar a minority, and I couldn't get over it in the beginning. I was really shocked. What came out in Patrick's details and all in his statistics, where we are, what was happening, and look, that should have been front page news in both national and local media, and it was nowhere in any of them.
no.
Like, I mean, for me, what happened was, look at the activity of people, whoever the hell they are, around the whole world. We're all being driven to living in places like North Korea and Russia and where the news is subdued all the time, where your head is cut off if you put it above the parapet if you're saying what's the real story. Do we want to go into that world? I
Are
think
we
it's
already in it?
yeah. Well, we're
We're
certainly
close enough.
part of it, but it's not. I would hope it's not cemented into society
Yeah, that's a great word, cemented.
at this stage.
Hmm.
I hope
No,
not.
I'd be Look, I'd be hopeful too, but I think we have to go. We probably have to go through a lot of processing and pain. Some people have to go through it because they can't change unless you can't make progress unless admit you've made huge mistakes. Now, whether
Yeah,
there's consequences for those mistakes or not, that's for other people to decide. But the starting point is accountability for the decisions you made, especially
yeah,
when we're talking about debts. We're talking about people's lives here, and
yeah,
and never mind talking about the destruction of mental health and kind of that whole arena that could be playing out for 20 years or 30 years. You
yeah,
don't know how long that could
and the
play out
poor
for.
and the story of the poor unfortunate people who died in nursing homes.
Oh, stop, yeah.
Mm.
It's yeah.
And you go back, look at the way the cervical cancer scandal was dealt with. So that was all that was full of cloaks and daggers too.
Well, imagine how many cloaks and daggers are trying to protect something like this that's 30, 50, 100 times bigger than that.
Yeah.
As a scandal, like it might take, like we'll see. We'll see what happens. Sure, look, we'll see what happens. But I suppose the hope is two people like yourself and as the publisher and Patrick as the researcher managed to fucking make a difference. That's what gives me hope.
Yeah.
And I do think in terms of I was kind of referring to this in an article recently. I think the future of the regeneration of journalism is going to be smaller and more people in a kind of dispersed way. So like what you're doing at Kilkenny Press, what maybe we're doing here in this conversation,
Sure.
and that the centralized, I think the trust in centralized corporate and government funded media is never coming back. Like the trust in it is too damaged, I think personally,
Yeah.
to rely on it totally ever again.
Yeah.
I don't know how you
I
feel.
would fully agree with you. Yeah, there, and I'd say the medical profession and the newspaper profession in particular, there would have been quite a trust in it, and it probably would have earned it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if people ever trusted the majority of politicians.
No. Well, we could
Who
always
don't
rely
forget
on.
Jerry? Who don't forget Jerry? They went along with the narrative too. A
Oh, I'm
few
not letting in.
braves,
Like, yeah.
yeah, a few brave souls spoke up. Um, to go back to the very beginning of, if you don't mind, of Pádraig's story, or sorry, Patrick's story. 24 councillors a majority of them didn't even accord him the courtesy of a reply.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had one. There's one little story, a very short story worth telling. Andrew McGuinness, Councillor Andrew McGuinness, who would be a son of John McGuinness, the
Fianna Fáil
long-serving
TD.
TD, the Fianna Fáil rebel, as I often call him, because he, in fairness to him, he has stood up in a crowd, and he sent the stuff to the statistics, I should say, to the health minister for his comments on him, and his reply, which was, as you can imagine, very, very well scrutinized by our accountant, Patrick, very, very handily left out 100 deceased men and women.
Mm-hmm.
They got lost. People that earlier we would have been talking about tragically were dismissed as having not existed
Well,
by
he's going to have
the minister's office.
Well, you see, there's a trail there now, because if anything comes out of this inquiry and it turns out that something serious is involved in this excess deaths, he's wasted 2 months of time to get a solution to it by responding in the manner he did. So, like, I would say about the 24 councillors, the reason they don't reply a lot of the time is probably plausible deniability, that they never saw the email. Or, you know, I got some emails.
But they're all, I can guarantee them, I know.
I'm sure they all read it.
Yeah,
I'm sure they all did read it.
They do, yeah. But I can't understand the local. I call them, sort of with respect and with a little grin as well, the small time big shots is what I call the councillors. Yeah, and I think, you know, they would sort of tell me and you that they were nearly the guardians of the local community. Oh, we look after the people. Oh, yeah, we'll get Mary a house and we'll do this and we'll do that and the other. Again, there are a few good souls in it. But here they were, and people were dying in their own community, and nobody knew why, nobody what was happening, and they ignored it. Mm-hmm. I mean, any councillors, and there's only there's not, you wouldn't need the 4 fingers to count them on, who didn't answer it, I would never trust him again.
No. It's funny because I was at a meeting there about a week ago with 2 local independent county councillors. It was on the migration issue now.
Yeah.
And it was I'd say they sat down and listened for an hour and over an hour. Now I'd say
did they stay awake for the full meeting?
Well, you could see the eyes glazing over on a couple of topics that were brought up. Do you know what I mean? And it was like, but they're well practiced in, they're well practiced in conflict and dealing with a kind of a crowd. Sure. But it was interesting. After the meeting was over, I hung around, and one of them was up having a pint at the bar, and he was talking to one of the kind of activist guys, and I sidled over to him for a chat. And the thing was, when you talk to him kind of on the personal basis, he kind of fucking agrees with everything you're saying. He gets it. It's not like
but when he goes into the council room, it's another story.
Yeah, but I suppose one of the things you'd say in the defense is, especially on the migration stuff, and I don't know how you feel on that, is that the emergency planning, there's almost like this new emergency planning legislation now, where there's no planning or safety or anything for any public buildings or land. And the local county councils are totally bypassed in all of what's going on. They're not, in some cases, they're not even informed on what's going on in their local community. And I think they're angry at that they're angry at that kind of, they're no longer, what did you call them? The
small time big shots.
The small time
maybe they are.
But I think what they're afraid of is they're not even small time big shots when this stuff is going on.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you. I suppose the positive we'll take about the whole thing is that more and more people are waking up. They can see what's happening, and they deserve answers when it comes to excess deaths, and maybe a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we've nearly an hour done, and I wanted to ask you because Jimmy has written. Jimmy has written a book, and I wanted to get into it. It's very interesting. We were chatting about it on the phone, and it's about the death. It's around the death of your father and the effect of that. Is that right?
Yeah. The name of the book, for what it's worth, is Treasure Lost, Treasure Found, and it covers. It's a kind of a memoir. My memoirs, really. It covers from the time my dad died when I was 3. My brother was 12 days old, and my mother was 28. He died suddenly overnight, just gone on us. The theme, I suppose, of the story would be living without your dad. Yeah, and look, the one thing I'll say to you, Jerry, is that should you decide to have a read of it, or anyone who might like or think about having a read of it, it's not a morbid story. There's a bit of fun and games in it too. There's a learning groove in it, and I would hope that people maybe who were in the same situation or who weren't would just have a read of it and say, God, that could be done. Don't say, I know it is terrible to lose your dad, I can assure you that. And it meant that I didn't visit his grave, by the way, for 25 years. I didn't want to believe he was there. I wanted to believe he was somewhere, but was still going to come back. And now I wasn't to school by at that stage.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
so I eventually went, of course. Yeah, of course I went. But there's a lot of other stuff in it too. Naturally, our politicians get mentioned, not always in favourable vein. COVID gets mentioned, and there's a wacky stories. Like, I'll just tell you one to give you an idea. There's a good few of these. There's a friend of mine was made a trip from Dublin Airport to whatever the name of the airport is in Malta on a 747, and he was the only passenger on board.
Wow.
There wasn't too many of them. Yeah, there wasn't too many of those things happening. But no, I love wacky stories. I don't know if you like them, Jerry, but as a journalist, I'd say I love them, because I remember when I took over when I got the job as editor of the Vice newspaper. Obviously, we all have detractors, and the guy put up. Do you remember boards.ie?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
A guy put up on boards.ie. This is another place for Jimmy Rhatigan to write about dogs that drink Guinness and wacky old ones that lived up the street from him. And you know what? It was the best laugh I got for a long time. He did me a favour. He probably thought he was annoying me. No. I'm sure, Jerry, you'd be of the same frame of mind.
Absolutely.
Look, none of us are below or above criticism.
Yeah, no, that's not at all. That's the whole problem we have, is we have a class of people.
But Jerry, and you're welcome to come down, but it's a long journey for you. If I were you, the roads are too bad in this weather anyway, maybe. But we're launching on the 21st of March in a beautiful place called Paris, Texas. Lovely name and all, in Kilkenny. And we'll have some great characters there on the night. And what I love about the night, I'm looking forward to it, is that some of the guys that were involved and some people that were involved in the wacky stories will be there.
Oh, that's great. And and where can they buy the book? Is the book available?
No, it's not available yet, but it will be available in some of the, I don't know what bookshops yet, but it will be, and it will also be available online. I'll be able to. Sure, I'll be chasing you for the story the next time.
You'll have links to it on Kilkenny Press and.
Oh, absolutely, and absolutely. Well, I'm already spending a lot of my time, as you can imagine, canvassing to have all my neighbours' friends and neighbours'
I'm
children
sure
and
it won't
all
be.
that.
I'd say it won't be a hard deal, and if I can get down to it, I certainly will. And
Yeah, of course. I know from my own
I'm
thing
sure
in
I'm.
journalism.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure I only
You
love
won't.
if you like writing or you like stories, you like your car as well because you're always in it going somewhere.
Sure,
And
sure. Would you
I,
believe it? There's another story for you. I never drove in my life. I was always Jerry in somebody's car, and there's loads of lads that they have a bit of a laugh some night when not so much now because I don't go to the pubs much or anything. But before, if a few of the poor unfortunates who turned out to be me chauffeurs came together, they said, "Yeah, did I drove 'em around Ireland too?" And so did I. Yes, I drove them to such a place, and they all. And so wasn't I showing them all the lovely
Mhm.
counties we have in Ireland?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's. I was actually down in Kinsale myself there on earlier in the week, just on the
Lovely
down to
place,
me.
lovely
Oh,
place. There was a
gorgeous.
Kilkenny man down there had a beautiful restaurant. Can't think of the name of it, but I think he's passed away now. It was a very vibrant place, Kilsale. Very
Oh,
nice,
yeah.
lovely, lovely seaside town, isn't it?
Oh, gorgeous location. Completely, yeah.
Yeah. Look
So
at.
it is.
Do you know what? Ireland, I always said, it'd be the best place in the world for holidays if you could put a roof on it.
Yes. And tell me, just a quick, you triggered something there in my head now, with the book and the people and the colleagues. When you went chasing this story 3 months ago, or even when you set up Kilkenny Press.ie 2 years ago, did
Or when
you,
I accidentally got it, yeah, yeah.
or when you actually got inherited or got it, did did was there any damage to relationships in the media world that you'd have built up over 50 years, or were you seem like a kind of a character that kind of can manage that kind of a situation, or
Um,
was there
yeah,
like,
I'd
oh,
say, look, I think to be honest, to be brutally honest, Jerry, uh, I'm sure there were people who didn't make a note of it to send me a Christmas card every year. But for the most part, what you say is correct.
yeah, yeah,
You know, I found that, you know, I do, you'll probably notice that I talk an awful lot. And I'm well
sure, I
aware
know
of
that.
that. My daughter is often laughs at that. She says, no, not really. I was at my daughter's wedding in Washington a few years ago, and some of the guests, you know, they might gather in a place for a drink or two on a day or two before the wedding. And I was in an upstairs bar, a bit like a bar like Cheers for all the world
Mhm.
in Old Town Alexandria, and they were all there. And I was sitting at the counter talking to my pint, and there was a chap from Kilkenny a few feet behind me, and I could hear him talking. Now, I will admit to eavesdropping at times to get stories, but I wasn't eavesdropping this time. But I just heard him, and there was one of the American guests with him, and the American says the guest said to your man, he said, Michael was his name. He said, Michael, who's that man at the bar? And he was referring to me. And he said, oh, that's Andrea's father. What's he like? He said. I said, he's a sound sort of a fella, he said, but he talked the hind legs off a donkey.
There's worse descriptions than that in the world.
So I got them too.
Now, Jimmy, one final question I want to ask you, and it's about the Kilkenny Press, is what's um, what's on your horizon outside of this excess deaths? On what's triggering your imagination or your interest at the moment in the world that's around you?
I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't be kind of as wrapped up in it as I was in all the newspapers I was working in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because at this stage, I'm into my 70s, and I'm delighted I got Kilkenny Press going because it's a wonderful hobby, and it's a hobby doing what I love best, as in writing. But
Mhm.
I don't chase every story. I don't go
Mhm.
too many places. Well, COVID didn't lend itself to that kind of stuff anyway. So basically, I don't deal too much with trivia. If I got stories like this every week, I'd be delighted. But sure, you
Yes.
don't.
You don't.
You
No,
know,
no, no, no.
no. What I do is as well is it's not this as we said earlier at some stage. I think there's no money involved. Even I even if somebody comes to me and say, can I advertise on your and it has happened. Can I advertise on your web? And I'd say, you certainly can, yeah. Is it very costly? I'd say it's free. So it's not too hard to get them ads, Jerry. But having said that,
you'll have Pfizer after you next now, Jimmy.
Who? Pfizer, oh yeah. But listen, we won't take their ad. We won't take their ad. No, we won't. Of course we will. No, look at I see where you're coming from, but no, I tell you, the whole focus of my life at this stage is the second part of the book's name, Treasure Found. That's my 5-year-old grandson. Like, yes. I mean, I wouldn't put off doing anything that would put him out now. I wouldn't.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, he loves his granddad, and his granddad adores him. I said to him, what does Grandad call you? You're my little, and he says, treasure.
Well, that's as good a place to end it as anywhere.
It is. I thought that. I was thinking of you there.
She's the consummate professional to the end.
Listen, but thank you very, very much. And it was a privilege to be asked to speak to you. And it was really enjoyable the last hour or so.
Yeah, sure. I told you it'd fly by, Jimmy.
You did. Yeah, you've taught me a lesson. Yeah, it is. Jerry, thanks from the bottom of my heart.
No, Jimmy,
lovely
thanks
meeting you, and you'd never know our paths may cross.
Well, hopefully they will. We'll have to make that happen. But thank you, and to thank Patrick for all you've done.
I absolutely will. The main man, as I call him.
Yeah, well, it took the both of you to get it out there, and you deserve great credit. So,
well, I suppose it takes two to tango, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Jerry, thank you very, very much.
No, and thanks yourself. We'll just end the recording.